Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're plunging into the intellectual currents of Alfred Marshall's Principles of Economics.
Mm.
Now,
Mm.
this isn't just some old textbook gathering dust. It's really a foundational work, shaped modern economic thought.
Absolutely.
And what's fascinating, I think, is how much it evolved. So many editions.
Indeed. What's truly remarkable about Marshall's principles, it wasn't static, not at all. It was a constantly refined project.
Right?
He meticulously shaped his arguments, refined his insights. It mirrored his own journey, and the huge shifts happening in the economic world then.
So, our mission today, basically, is to uncover those core ideas in Marshall's principles that still resonate.
Yeah.
Explore how his own thinking matured through all those revisions,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe pull out some surprising nuggets, things that reveal the man behind this, well, monumental text.
Definitely.
You're going to walk away with, hopefully, a much clearer, quicker grasp of concepts that are still shaping things today.
That's the goal.
Okay, let's start with Marshall's dedication. I mean, almost obsessive dedication to this book.
Oh, yeah.
It wasn't just a one-off thing. Principles of Economics went through so many editions. What was driving him? Why keep revising?
Well, Marshall himself was famously particular. He was actually alarmed by how long the book was getting.
Really? Alarmed?
Yes. With each new edition, it grew. So he made a deliberate choice.
Hmm.
Anything new, he added, well, it had to be balanced out.
How so?
By removing something else he felt was, less essential or redundant.
Ah, okay.
This often meant cutting, say, historical bits or footnotes from earlier versions. He was essentially streamlining his own masterpiece.
And this wasn't his first big work, was it? I remember seeing references to economics of industry.
Precisely. Yeah, before the principles, he was working on a broader treatise.
Okay.
But he paused that to co-author Economics of Industry. That was with his wife, Mary Paley Marshall, back in 1877.
Interesting.
And here's a lesser-known fact. A serious illness around that time nearly suspended his studies for several years.
Wow, okay. Interestingly, portions of that bigger treatise were actually privately printed by Professor Sidgwick, even before the principles came out properly.
One detail I found really intriguing was his decision to change the name of the field.
Oh, yes.
Why push for economics over the standard political economy? What was the big deal?
It was a very deliberate move on his part. He felt political interests, that phrase it often implied, looking out for just some parts of the nation.
Right, specific groups or parties.
Exactly, or even partisan interests.
Mm-hmm.
For him, the study needed to be broader, more impartial, you could say.
So to avoid that narrow feel,
He thought it best just to use economic science, or, more shortly, economics. It was about trying to elevate the discipline, get it beyond the day-to-day politics.
and he had that kind of philosophical motto guiding his whole approach, didn't he?
Yes, his famous motto, natura non facit saltum.
Which means...
Nature does not make a leap.
Now, he wasn't denying that, big shocks happen in the economy, economic earthquakes and flashes of lightning, as he put it.
Right.
But his method was to focus first on the things that happen frequently, the patterns, the stuff that's orderly enough to be watched closely, measured.
The fundamentals.
Those formed the foundation for him, the sudden, rare, hard-to-observe things. They were for special examination later. Study the rhythms before you tackle the storms, basically.
Makes sense.
So,
Okay, moving from his approach to the field itself, let's zero in on some of the sharp analytical tools he developed. Starting with capital, he had a very specific view on interest versus income from investments.
right. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, Marshall drew this really crucial distinction.
Okay.
He insisted that interest, the term itself, should only apply to free or floating capital.
What did he mean by free capital?
Think of it as liquid funds, cash or resources you can easily move around, invest in different things quickly.
Got it.
Income from other investments, the more fixed ones, like factories or machines, he saw that as being of the nature of rent.
Ah,
And he viewed capital and income as, well, related terms, correlative, emphasizing that all wealth, ultimately, is meant to yield some kind of benefit or gain, an income.
so there's a really careful, almost precise distinction in his mind between wealth and capital.
Absolutely. Wealth is the broader term. It's the whole stock of economic goods, everything a nation has, basically. You look at wealth for general well-being.
Okay.
Capital, though, is defined by its Perspectiveness and its productiveness, meaning its forward-looking nature. You invest capital now hoping for a benefit later.
Right.
And productiveness just means it helps you create or produce something new, generate more wealth.
And he specifically defined social capital.
Yes, as things made by mankind as resources wherewith to meet future needs. And note this, he deliberately excluded the free gifts of nature, like land or minerals, from that definition of social capital.
Why is that distinction important?
It's really key for understanding how a nation's resources are classified, how they're used, how they generate income. It separates man-made assets from natural endowments.
This leads us right into one of Marshall's most, well, intriguing contributions, and one that's often misunderstood. Quasi-rent.
Yes, quasi-rent.
How is that different from just normal rent? How can we get our heads around it?
Okay, so quasi-rent is the income you get from your existing production stuff machines, buildings during a short period.
Short period being?
A time frame where you can't easily increase or decrease the supply of those things. They're fixed, essentially. You just have to work with what you've got. They're taken for granted, as he put it.
Okay, fixed in the short term.
Exactly. And he used some great thought experiments to explain it.
Like the meteoric stones.
That's the one for true rent. Imagine, he said, a meteoric shower of a few thousand stones as hard as diamonds but very large fell all in one place.
Okay. Unlikely, but okay.
Right. The owners of these totally unique, unreplicable stones would get a true economic rent because you simply cannot make more of them. Supply is fixed, period.
That makes sense. That's rent, so quasi-rent.
For that, he used the pony analogy.
Ponies?
Yeah. He compared hiring a pony to rent. But unlike land, he said, if you make a mistake in how many ponies you have, you can fix it relatively quickly.
Because
ponies are quickly reared and they quickly die off. Supply adjusts faster than land.
I see.
So any extra profit you make from your ponies above the normal costs, that's the quasi-rent. It can only last for short periods. Because soon, either more ponies will be bred or some will die off, bringing things back to normal. It's temporary.
Temporary surplus. Got it. That's a brilliant distinction.
Mm-hmm.
And this links directly to Ricardo's famous idea about rent not entering into the cost of production. How did Marshall tweak that?
Right, Ricardo's doctrine. Marshall said, okay, the idea that rent doesn't factor into the cost of production, that's largely true if you're looking at agricultural produce as a whole.
As a whole, okay.
But, he warned, it becomes misleading if you apply it to any one kind of produce taken separately, like just wheat or just corn.
The specifics matter.
Exactly. And he also pointed out, for instance, that mining royalties do enter into the cost of producing minerals. You have to pay to extract them.
Makes sense.
And crucially, he argued that you can't overlook the indirect effect of rent on cost of production. That applies in manufacturing and agriculture. He was adding layers, nuance, showing that these economic rules aren't always simple. They depend heavily on the context.
He really loved those distinctions.
He did. Precision was key.
Okay, Marshall also gave us the representative firm.
Yeah.
That was important for figuring out normal value, wasn't it? What was its role?
The representative firm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not about finding some perfectly average company. It's more of a theoretical benchmark.
A tool.
A conceptual tool, exactly. Like a kind of steady compass. It helps economists understand how a typical industry reaches a sort of normal state over time.
So it helps analyze equilibrium.
Yes, the equilibrium of normal supply and demand. And even situations with multiple positions of equilibrium. It's a way to model how industries adjust and settle in the long run.
And he's also, of course, famous for his insights on demand, specifically the law of satiable wants. Although most of us probably know it by another name, right?
Yes. Today, we usually call it the law of diminishing utility.
Right. Diminishing utility.
He brilliantly laid out the difference between total utility. That's the overall satisfaction you get from consuming a certain amount of something.
Like 5 cookies.
Right. And marginal utility, that's the satisfaction you get from consuming one more unit.
The 6th cookie.
Exactly.
Right.
And the point is that marginal utility usually decreases. The first slice of pizza is amazing. The second is great.
The 10th slice, not so much.
Precisely. By the 10th slice, the extra satisfaction, the marginal utility might be 0, or even negative if you feel sick. And this simple idea is fundamental. It helps us understand how your demand schedule, how much you want of something at different prices, is formed. Why we don't just keep buying more and more of the same thing forever. Our wants get satisfied, or at least the additional satisfaction drops off.
Okay, let's turn to another foundational distinction Marshall made. You mentioned earlier it holds the key to many difficulties. That's the difference between long periods and short periods.
Yes, crucial.
Why was this time distinction so vital in his analysis?
It's paramount because it changes everything about how you look at costs and prices and decisions.
How so?
Well, for short periods, your basic production setup, your factory, your key machines, maybe your core skilled staff, those things have to be taken for granted. They're fixed. You can't easily change them overnight.
Right, you're stuck with them for a bit.
Exactly. So any income you get from using that fixed setup beyond the variable costs is that quasi-rent we talked about, that temporary surplus.
Okay. Short period, fixed setup, quasi-rent.
Got it. But for long periods, well, you have time, you have flexibility, you can adjust everything. Build a new factory, buy new machines, train new workers.
Oh, okay.
So the supply price in the long run isn't based on the fixed setup. It's based on what's just needed to call forth those new investments of capital, material, and personal required for future production. It's the cost of maintaining and expanding capacity over time.
So the whole cost structure looks different.
Completely different. It highlights how your planning horizon, whether you're thinking short-term or long-term, totally alters the economic calculations.
He also had some specific thoughts on using supply curves, didn't he? Something about market problems versus normal problems.
He did. It's quite insightful about his method, actually. He clarified later in his work that he'd actually stopped using supply and demand curves for what he called market problems, meaning those immediate day-to-day snapshot-in-time transactions, like the price of fish at the dock today.
Okay. Why did he stop using curves for that?
He basically said he found people would not heed the note of warning. They kept misinterpreting the curves.
Oh.
He warned that his main normal problem, curves the ones for analyzing long-run trends, relate to rates of production and consumption over time. Think flows.
Right. Per week, per year.
Exactly. Whereas market curves, if you were to draw them for those immediate problems, would relate to the total amounts bought and sold at a specific moment. Think stocks.
Different concepts.
Very different. His point was you can't just slap the same graph onto every economic question. Analyzing long-term industry supply requires a different tool, a different mindset, than analyzing why the price of apples spiked this afternoon. It was about methodological rigor. Choose the right tool for the job.
Makes sense. Okay, let's switch gears a bit to the human side of things, human capital. One of the really interesting parts of Marshall is his focus on the standard of life versus the standard of comfort.
A very important distinction for him.
What did he mean by that? And why did it matter so much for wages?
Right. Well, this really gets into his ideas about human well-being and progress. He argued that the right means to actually raise wages sustainably is to raise not merely the standard of comfort or of wants.
Which means?
Which means just having more stuff or satisfying basic desires, more income, nicer things.
Okay, not just that.
No.
Okay.
He said you need to raise the standard of life, which includes activities as well as wants.
Activities.
Yes. It's not just about what you consume passively. It's about what you do, your skills, your education, your engagement, your opportunities for growth, your health, your character even. It's a much richer concept.
So it's holistic.
Very. He believed that what people consider conventional necessaries or even superfluous comforts isn't fixed. It actually depends on the efficiency of labor. If people become more efficient, more skilled, more engaged, a higher standard of life, then they can achieve a higher standard of comfort too.
So it's about way more than just the paycheck, isn't it? It's about what people can actually achieve, what they experience.
Precisely that. He noted that, sure, competition tends to make weekly wages in similar jobs line up with how efficient workers are.
Okay.
But he said it's really efficiency earnings, how much you earn relative to your actual output or skill, that tend toward equality across different kinds of jobs in the long run.
Efficiency earnings, right.
And he also stressed that the attractiveness of a trade does not depend merely on its money earnings, but its net advantages.
Net advantages meaning?
All the other stuff. Job security, how pleasant the work is, chances for promotion, the social standing of the job, safety. It was a really comprehensive view of what makes a job good.
Marshall also looked really closely at industrial organization, technology, the stuff happening all around him.
Yeah.
What did he see as the role of machinery? Division of labor.
Yeah, he was keenly observing the Industrial Revolution. He saw that machinery, quite obviously, relieves the strain on human muscles, takes away the backbreaking labor.
Okay.
But interestingly, he also thought it could prevent monotony of work from involving monotony of life. By freeing up mental energy, perhaps? Reducing sheer physical exhaustion might allow people more scope for engaging activities outside of work. He also highlighted the new era of interchangeable parts.
Huge development.
Absolutely. Driven by machine-made machinery, a massive leap in efficiency. And all these things, technology, division of labor, they contributed to what he called external and internal economies in production.
Right, economies of scale, basically.
Sort of. Internal economies are the advantages a single company gets as it gets bigger, buying inputs cheaper, using specialized machines better, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
External economies are the benefits that all firms in an industry get when the industry grows in a particular area, like having a pool of skilled labor nearby or specialized suppliers setting up shop, benefits that are external to any single firm but help everyone.
Got it. And thinking bigger picture, the broader influence of progress, what did you conclude about its impact on wages, on employment security?
Well, overall, he suggested that progress had actually done more than is generally thought to raise the wages of labor.
So, a positive view, mostly.
Mostly, yes. And he thought it had probably lessened rather than increased the inconstancy of employment of free labor, maybe made jobs a bit more stable overall, despite the disruption.
But he added a caveat, didn't he?
He did. He was no blind optimist. He cautioned strongly that very great evils remain. Progress hadn't solved everything by any means.
And he had a specific warning about just reducing work hours?
Yes, he critically analyzed what he called the fallacy of supposing that such a diminution of the hours of work, as did not increase efficiency at least in proportion, could permanently increase the demand for labor or the constancy of employment.
Meaning?
Meaning, basically just cutting everyone's hours without finding ways to maintain or boost productivity per hour wouldn't magically create more jobs or make employment more stable in the long run. Efficiency had to be part of the equation. It's a really interesting, nuanced take on work-life balance from way back then.
It really is. Finally, Marshall even looked towards the future of society. He saw some kind of shift happening, didn't he? Towards a new social organization.
He did. He was observing how new technologies, like the telegraph and the printing press, were empowering people. They enabled people to decide on their own remedies for their evils, as he put it. More information, easier organization.
Giving people more agency.
Exactly. And he saw society gradually moving towards forms of collectivism which will be higher than the old.
Collectivism.
Yeah.
Interesting term for him to use.
Yes, but he qualified it significantly.
Yeah.
Higher than the old because they will be based on strong, self-disciplined individuality.
Ah, so not top-down state control.
No, not necessarily. It seems he envisioned a future where cooperation and social consciousness grew, but it had to be built upon responsible, capable individuals. It reflects this belief in progress and social evolution, but always tempered by the need for individual responsibility and strong character.
So wrapping this all up, what's the big takeaway? Marshall's principles. It's clearly not just some historical artifact. It feels like a living testament to the idea that economic understanding isn't static. It needs constant refinement, right? Deep conceptual clarity. And keeping a really keen eye on the messy realities of human life.
Absolutely. His careful distinctions like quasi-rent, standard of life, they still offer incredibly powerful ways to look at our own complex modern economy.
Yeah.
And I think his ability to synthesize so much information, to connect the dots between different ideas, and then to keep questioning his own assumptions, that's what makes his work still so relevant. He really reminds us that economics, at its heart, isn't just about abstract models. It's deeply, deeply intertwined with human well-being, with society, with progress itself.
So for you, our listener, here's something to maybe mull over after this. Given Marshall's insight that the real way to raise wages is to raise the standard of life, including activities, not just comfort, and his observation about the wastefulness of excessive work, how might his century-old ideas actually challenge how we think today about productivity, about work-life balance, and about what really counts as societal progress in the 21st century? Something to chew on.